Breaking news from Baltimore. Just minutes ago, an extraordinary moment inside M&T Bank Stadium sent thousands of fans into absolute chaos as Jimin of BTS delivered a spectacular solo dance performance that transformed the atmosphere of the entire stadium. The lights suddenly dropped. The music began to change. For a brief moment, the enormous stadium became almost completely silent as thousands of fans waited to see what was about to happen. Then Jimin stepped into the spotlight. In Baltimore erupted. The reaction was immediate. Thousands of fans screamed at once as Jimin launched into a powerful dance sequence filled with sharp movements, dramatic pauses, and explosive choreography. Phones instantly shot into the air. Light sticks moved through the darkness. Fans stood on their feet, shouting Jimin's name as the performance intensified with every beat. It was the kind of moment that makes a concert feel larger than life. Jimin did not need a long speech. He did not need an elaborate introduction. The moment the music hit, his movements became the message. 1 second he was standing almost perfectly still, allowing the anticipation to build. The next second he exploded into motion. Every movement appeared carefully controlled. Every transition seemed perfectly timed. Every beat brought another wave of screams from the crowd. And as the choreography became more intense, the audience became louder. The sound of thousands of fans echoing throughout the stadium created an atmosphere that was almost impossible to describe. This was no longer just a performance. It had become an experience shared by everyone inside the building. From the fans closest to the stage to those watching from the highest sections of the stadium, people were reacting at the same time. Some were screaming. Some were recording. Some were simply standing frozen in disbelief. Others appeared to be trying to process what they had just witnessed while still cheering at the top of their lungs. And then came the moment that pushed the atmosphere to another level. Jimin moved into the center of the stage and delivered one of the most explosive sections of the choreography. The crowd completely lost control. The stadium erupted with an enormous wave of noise. It seemed as though every section of the audience was reacting simultaneously. The screams became louder. The applause became faster. The energy continued building. And Jimin kept dancing. That is what made the moment so powerful. He never appeared overwhelmed by the enormous reaction. Instead, he seemed to feed from it. The louder the crowd became, the more confident the performance appeared. The choreography became faster. The movements became sharper. The transitions became more dramatic. And the audience followed every single second. For those watching from inside the stadium, it was almost impossible to take their eyes away from the stage. Jimin's stage presence turned the entire venue into one giant theater. Every spotlight seemed to follow him. Every camera appeared focused on him. And every scream seemed to arrive at exactly the right moment. This is what happens when a performer has the ability to command an arena without saying a word. Jimin simply moved. And the audience responded. There is something uniquely powerful about seeing a performer deliver a moment like this live. A video can capture the choreography. A camera can capture the facial expressions. A microphone can record the screaming. But none of those things can completely reproduce the feeling of being surrounded by thousands of people who are experiencing the same moment at exactly the same time. That is what made this performance so unforgettable. Everyone inside the stadium was part of it. And Baltimore made sure Jimin knew it. The reaction from the audience was enormous. Fans were holding their phones above their heads, desperately trying to capture every second. Some recordings focused on Jimin. Others captured the crowd. And some showed the entire stadium glowing with thousands of lights as the audience screamed together. Within moments, the performance had all the ingredients of a viral concert moment. A spectacular artist. A massive audience. An explosive dance break. A dramatic atmosphere. And a reaction so loud that it became part of the performance itself. The concert continued, but something had already changed. The audience had been energized. Fans were still talking about the performance. People were turning toward friends and family as if asking whether they had all just witnessed the same thing. The excitement did not disappear when the music changed. It remained in the stadium. And that is how unforgettable concert moments are created. They are not always the result of an entire show. Sometimes they come from just a few minutes. Sometimes they come from one song, one movement, one expression, one unexpected moment when the artist takes complete control of the stage. Tonight that moment belonged to Jimin. His dance performance became the center of attention because it combined something that has always made his stage presence so captivating: technical precision and emotional expression. Every movement appeared deliberate. Nothing felt random. There was control in every step. There was confidence in every transition. And there was an intensity that made it impossible for the audience to look away. Perhaps that is why the reaction became so massive. Jimin was not simply performing the choreography. He was performing directly to the energy of the crowd. And the crowd gave him everything in return. This kind of exchange between an artist and an audience is difficult to create. It requires trust. It requires timing. And it requires an artist who understands exactly how to control anticipation. Jimin appeared to understand all of it. He knew when to slow down. He knew when to hold a pose. He knew when to let the silence grow. And he knew exactly when to explode into the next movement. That contrast made the performance even more powerful. A quiet moment created anticipation. A sudden movement released it. A dramatic pause created suspense. Another burst of choreography created another explosion of screaming. Over and over again, the pattern repeated. And each time the crowd became louder. The stadium seemed to move with him. The audience was no longer simply watching the performance. They had become part of it. That is one of the most remarkable things about stadium concerts. An artist may be standing on one stage, but the reaction can come from tens of thousands of people at once. One person begins screaming. Another joins. Then another section responds. Within seconds, the entire venue can become a wall of sound. That is exactly what happened during Jimin's dance moment in Baltimore. The reaction spread through the stadium like a wave. And once it started, there was no stopping it. Jimin continued moving across the stage, while fans screamed louder and louder. The lighting intensified around him. The music reached another level. And for a few seconds, it felt as though the entire stadium had been transformed into one enormous heartbeat. Beat after beat. Move after move. Scream after scream. The connection between Jimin and the audience became impossible to ignore. And then came the final section. The performance reached its climax. Jimin delivered one last sequence of precise movements before bringing the dance to a dramatic finish. For a brief second, the crowd seemed to hold its breath. Then the stadium erupted again. The applause was enormous. The screams continued. Fans shouted Jimin's name. And thousands of phones remained pointed toward the stage. The performance had ended. But the moment had not. That is the difference between an ordinary performance and an unforgettable one. An ordinary performance ends when the music stops. An unforgettable performance continues inside the minds of the people who witnessed it. Fans leave the venue talking about it. They replay the footage. They send clips to their friends. They search for different angles. They compare recordings. They recreate the choreography. They discuss the most powerful moments. And eventually, one performance becomes part of the larger story of a tour. Tonight, Jimin gave Baltimore exactly that kind of moment. And the timing made it even more special. The excitement surrounding BTS in Baltimore was already enormous before the performance began. Fans had spent hours preparing. They had traveled long distances. They had waited outside. They had filled the area around the stadium with purple lights and BTS merchandise. They had spent months waiting for the chance to see their favorite artists on stage. And when Jimin finally stepped into the spotlight, all of that anticipation came rushing forward. That emotional buildup may have been one of the reasons the reaction became so intense. For many fans, this was not simply another concert. It was a moment they had been waiting for. And when Jimin delivered that explosive dance performance, it gave them a memory they could carry home. You could feel that excitement in the audience. You could hear it. You could see it in the way fans reacted to every movement. The energy was continuous. There was no hesitation. Every new beat brought another reaction. And every reaction seemed to make the performance even bigger. That is the magic of a live BTS show. The audience becomes part of the production. The performers create the moment, but the fans amplify it. And tonight, Baltimore amplified Jimin in a huge way. The sound of the crowd became almost as powerful as the music itself. There were moments when the screaming appeared to overpower the audio coming from the stage. And that says everything about how strongly the audience connected with what they were seeing. Jimin had captured their attention completely. He had captured their emotion. And for those few unforgettable minutes, there was nowhere else anyone wanted to look. The entire stadium was focused on him. This is why moments like this matter so much in a concert tour. A tour can contain dozens of songs, hundreds of choreographed movements, thousands of lights, millions of dollars in production. But fans will still remember one particular moment. The moment that made them scream. The moment they captured on camera. The moment they immediately wanted to share. And tonight, that moment may very well be Jimin's spectacular dance performance. The images from the stadium were already enough to tell the story. A huge stage. A sea of purple lights. Thousands of fans standing together. And Jimin in the center, completely commanding the performance. It looked like the kind of scene designed for a movie. But it was happening in real time. And the people inside the stadium were experiencing every second of it. There is also something special about watching an artist who is completely comfortable in the spotlight. Jimin appeared calm even as the audience became more and more intense. He never looked lost. He never looked uncertain. He seemed to know exactly where every movement needed to go. That confidence made the choreography feel even more powerful. Instead of simply following the music, Jimin appeared to control it. His movements created the rhythm. His pauses created anticipation. And his explosive sequences delivered the payoff. That is the kind of performance that separates a dancer from a true performer. A dancer can execute movements. A performer can make an entire stadium feel those movements. And tonight Jimin did exactly that. The Baltimore audience responded with everything they had. This was the kind of crowd reaction that performers dream about. Loud, immediate, uncontrolled, genuine, and completely emotional. At one point, it may have felt less like a concert and more like an event unfolding in real time. The audience was witnessing something they knew they would remember. And that awareness made the moment even more intense. People were not just watching. They were documenting. They wanted proof. They wanted to save the moment. They wanted to be able to replay it later. And that's why so many phones went into the air almost instantly. Because nobody wanted to leave that stadium knowing they had missed the chance to capture even a few seconds of Jimin's performance. The desire to preserve that moment is understandable. Concerts happen once. The atmosphere can never be perfectly recreated. The exact combination of music, lighting, choreography, audience reaction, and emotion exists for only a few minutes. Then it is gone. All that remains are memories and recordings. And tonight, Baltimore created plenty of both. Jimin's dance performance may have lasted only a short amount of time, but its impact was much larger. It gave fans something to talk about. It gave the stadium an unforgettable memory. And it gave the internet another potential viral moment. That is how modern concert culture works. A live performance begins in one physical location. But once fans start recording and sharing what they saw, the moment can travel everywhere. A single clip can reach people thousands of miles away. A fan in Baltimore records Jimin. Someone in Los Angeles sees the video. Another fan in Seoul watches it. Someone in London shares it. Another account reposts it. And suddenly, a moment that happened inside a stadium becomes a global conversation. That is what makes a spectacular performance so powerful in the digital era. It doesn't end with the final note. It continues through every screen. Every repost. Every reaction. Every fan edit. And every person saying, "Did you see that?" Tonight. That sentence may be appearing everywhere. Did you see Jimin? Did you see that dance? Did you hear the crowd? Did you see how loud the stadium became? Those are the questions that turn a performance into a phenomenon. And perhaps the most exciting part is that the story is only beginning. The first clips are appearing. The first reactions are being shared. The first fan discussions are taking shape. And over the next several hours, that momentum could grow even larger. Fans will analyze the choreography. They will replay the most dramatic sections. They will discuss the expressions. They will compare different camera angles. They will talk about the crowd reaction. And they will decide which moment was their favorite. For some fans, it will be the moment Jimin first entered the spotlight. For others, it will be the explosive dance break. Some will remember the crowd screaming. Others will remember the lighting. And some will simply remember the feeling of standing in a stadium surrounded by thousands of people who were all reacting to the same performance. That is the beauty of a concert. Different people can watch the exact same show and leave with completely different memories. But some moments are so powerful that almost everyone agrees on one thing. That was incredible. And tonight, Jimin gave Baltimore one of those moments. The performance did not need a complicated explanation. It did not need a long speech. It simply needed Jimin, the stage, the music, and the audience. Everything else followed naturally. The stadium reacted. The fans screamed. The cameras recorded. And the moment was born. Perhaps the most remarkable detail is how quickly the entire atmosphere changed. Before Jimin stepped forward, the audience was waiting. There was anticipation. There was curiosity. There was excitement. Then the performance began. And suddenly, everything became louder. Brighter. Faster. More intense. That transition is what makes live performance so thrilling. You can feel the energy change. You can feel the audience realizing that something special is happening. And once that realization spreads, the entire venue becomes electric. That is exactly what happened tonight. Jimin walked into the spotlight. And Baltimore responded. For many fans, this may become the defining visual of the night. Not because nothing else happened. Not because the rest of the concert wasn't important. But because one unforgettable moment has the power to summarize an entire experience. Jimin standing on the stage. The lights surrounding him. The music rising. Thousands of fans screaming. A spectacular dance. And one massive explosion of energy. That is the image people are likely to remember. That is the moment people are likely to share. And that is the moment that may continue growing long after the concert ends. Tonight, Jimin didn't simply perform in Baltimore. He created a moment that belonged to Baltimore. A moment that connected performer and audience. A moment that turned choreography into emotion. A moment that transformed sound into energy. And a moment that reminded everyone inside that stadium why live music can still feel completely magical. Because sometimes the best moments are impossible to predict. You can plan the choreography. You can plan the lighting. You can plan the music. But you cannot completely plan the audience reaction. That part happens naturally. And tonight the audience reaction was massive. It was spontaneous. It was emotional. And it was unmistakable. Jimin had them. He had the stadium. He had the moment. And when the final movement arrived, Baltimore gave him everything in return. The screaming. The applause. The cheers. The lights. The endless sea of phones. All of it became part of the performance. And for those watching from home, the first clips may only show a fraction of what it felt like inside the venue. Because there is no substitute for being there when a stadium erupts. You can watch the video. You can hear the screaming. You can see Jimin dancing. But being surrounded by thousands of voices while the stage